I want you to start by picturing a very specific smell. You know the one. It's that scent of old newsprint, maybe a little bit of dust.
Yeah, like an attic or the bottom of a bin at a used bookstore.
Exactly. And you find this stack of old comics from, say, the 1950s or 60s. And you look at them and you see colorful heroes. Bam, POW. Sound effects. Good guys punching bad guys. It just looks like simple, disposable fun.
Which, to be fair, is the perfect disguise. I mean, if you want to hide a really revolutionary message, you don't stick it in a dense textbook.
Yeah.
You put it in a picture book that costs 10 cents.
Right. Because if you look closer, if you put on the right historical lenses, that stack of paper suddenly becomes this incredible map of 20th century political paranoia, a critique of communism, and avenue.
This is the really surprising part, a really profound expression of the Jewish experience. It's this amazing dissonance, isn't it? We're looking at these huge pop culture icons, Superman, Captain America, the X-Men, and realizing they weren't just, reflecting American culture. They were actively trying to repair it. They were processing global trauma on the page.
And that is exactly what we're doing in this deep dive. We are peeling back the covers to find the secret identity of the comic book industry itself. Now, I want to be really clear from the start. Our foundation for today's discussion comes from the incredible work of historian and Professor Reuven Faingold of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Yes, and we're adapting his analysis, which was originally in Portuguese. He's done this fantastic job of mapping how these Jewish creators used comics to navigate, well, everything. The Cold War, American capitalism, the trauma of World War II.
So this isn't just us talking. This is history. And to understand that silver age of comics, that creative boom in the 60s, the professor argues that we actually have to start with the crash.
The post-war hangover.
Exactly. It's 1945. The war is over. You'd think it would be a victory lap for someone like Captain America, but the whole industry just tanks. Why?
Well, their whole reason for being just evaporated. During the war, the job description was simple. Punch Nazis. It was patriotic, it was black and white, and it sold millions and millions of copies.
Sure.
But then the war ends, and that patriotic fever just disappears. Suddenly, the great enemy is gone, and the publishers are left with these huge superhero titles and no one to fight. Sales just fell off a cliff.
So these business people who were used to making a lot of money, they had to pivot, and they pivoted hard. This is where we see the rise of EC Comics.
And a total shift in tone. If patriotism doesn't sell, well, fear always does. EC Comics figured this out really fast. They went straight into horror, sci-fi, murder mysteries, alien invasions.
But this is where the context is so important. The professor points out this wasn't just random spooky stuff. The aliens had a subtext.
It was the new American nightmare. The alien was a stand-in for the communist. You have to remember, to the average American, the Soviet Union was this huge, monolithic, and kind of unknown threat. They were the ultimate other.
So in the comics, they become literal monsters.
Body snatchers, invaders from another world trying to infiltrate our society from within. It's pure Red Scare paranoia.
So the comics are reflecting this growing fear. But then in a huge twist of irony, the comic industry itself gets targeted by its own witch hunt.
It was a full-blown moral panic, and it really had a face. A psychiatrist named Dr. Frederick Wertham, he wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent.
And he didn't pull any punches, did he? He basically argued that comic books were the main cause of juvenile delinquency.
He went way further than that. He got very specific. He claimed Wonder Woman was a symbol of sadomasochism. He looked at Batman and Robin, this wealthy bachelor living with a teenage boy, and he strongly implied a homosexual relationship.
Which, in the 1950s, that's not just gossip. That's a career-ending accusation of moral subversion.
Absolutely. It was coming from two sides. You had the fear of moral decay from Wertham and the fear of communism from the government. William Gaines, who owned EC Comics, was actually hauled before a government committee that was hunting for communist infiltrators.
That's just incredible. The guy publishing Tales from the Crypt is being investigated as a national security threat.
So the industry panicked. To avoid government censorship, they censored themselves. They created the Comics Code Authority.
The CCA. That little stamp on all the old comics.
Right, and it was draconian, it banned gore, it banned any disrespect for authority, and it effectively killed the horror genre overnight. If you didn't have the stamp, you didn't get on the newsstand.
But, censorship often forces creativity in new directions. EC Comics was basically dead, but Gaines had one title that survived the purge, a little thing called Made D.
The great exception. And it survived because technically it was a magazine, not a comic book, so it could kind of skirt the rules. Gaines and this brilliant Jewish cartoonist, Harvey Kurtzman, they realized, okay, if we can't do horror, we'll do satire.
And Memony was not polite satire. It wasn't the New Yorker.
Oh, no. It was crude, it was aggressive, but it was so intelligent. Faingold's research identifies Menady as basically the first American counterculture publication. While everyone else was being sanitized, Menady was ruthlessly mocking the very culture that created the code.
It's that classic Yiddish humor tradition, isn't it? You laugh at authority to take away its power.
Exactly. Alfred E. Newman, this gap-toothed kid, asking, "What, me worry?" In the middle of all this Cold War anxiety. It was satire as a survival tool. But while Menady was taking on the culture, a new wave was building to take on the politics. And that is the dawn of Marvel, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
And this is where the research really gets fascinating. I think most people know the Fantastic Four. But if you look at their origin story in 1961, it's not a superhero story. It's a geopolitical thriller.
It is the space race, 100%. In the very first issue, the narration says they're stealing a rocket to get into space before a foreign power beats them to it.
They don't have to say the USSR. You just know.
And then they get hit by cosmic rays, this fear of the unknown out in space. But the villain is where it gets really literal. Dr. Doom.
The dictator in the Iron Mask.
Who rules a little country called Latveria.
Which sounds suspiciously like Latvia.
Which was, at that time, a Soviet socialist republic. Faingold argues this is no accident. Lee and Kirby couldn't have their heroes invade the actual Soviet Union every month. It's too on the nose. So they create a proxy state. Latveria is a stand-in for the whole Iron Curtain.
So if the Fantastic Four is the space race, then the Hulk is the bomb.
May 1962, peak nuclear anxiety. And Bruce Banner isn't just any scientist, he's a Jewish nuclear physicist. A booming but also a very morally complicated profession after 1945.
And I had totally forgotten this detail from his origin. The gamma bomb explosion that creates the Hulk?
Yeah.
It wasn't an accident?
No, it's sabotage.
By his assistant, a guy literally named Igor.
I mean, subtlety was not the goal. Igor is described as a Yugoslavian spy, so, communist, but not directly Moscow. But for the American reader, it's all the Reds. The Hulk is born from communist sabotage and American nuclear arrogance.
And in those early issues, he's smashing Little Red Men and fighting communist plots. But there's a nuance there, because he's also being hunted by the U.S. military, by General Ross.
And that's the key. Banner is trapped between the communist spy who ruined his life and the American military-industrial complex that wants to control or kill him. It perfectly captures the paranoia of the Cold War scientist.
We see that with Iron Man, too. Tony Stark's origin is tied directly to Vietnam.
Absolutely. He's captured by communists. He builds the suit to escape, literally using American technological genius to break free from communist captors. And his enemies back home are a checklist of Cold War fears. The Crimson Dynamo is Soviet. The Mandarin is this mix of Chinese stereotypes and, alien power.
Hard propaganda, let's just call it what it is.
It is. It's very entertaining propaganda, but it's reinforcing a very specific narrative about American individualism versus Soviet collectivism.
But then you have Captain America, and this is where the timeline is so important. He wasn't a Cold War creation.
No, he's from World War II. And you have to look at the date on Captain America #1. It hits the newsstands in December 1940.
A full year before Pearl Harbor.
Which means the United States was not at war. The country was deeply divided. You had the America First movement. You had Nazi sympathizers filling Madison Square Garden.
And into that climate, two Jewish kids from New York, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, they put a character dressed in the American flag on a comic book cover.
Punching Adolf Hitler right in the jaw. It was a political scream. They were saying, this is our enemy, when much of the country was still trying to pretend it wasn't.
So when Marvel brings him back, when they thaw him out in the 60s, he has to be repurposed. He goes from fighting Nazis to...
Who? To fighting everyone. He fights in Vietnam against giant Viet Cong. He joins Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. to fight Hydra, which is this weird mix of leftover Nazism and Soviet-style conspiracy. He just becomes the soldier for whatever the enemy is that week.
Okay, so we've covered the political anxiety.
Yeah.
But I want to go deeper to the layer Professor Faingold argues is the most important, the Jewish experience.
Yeah.
Because under all the spandex and the Cold War plots, there is so much theology.
It's in the creator's DNA. I mean, we've mentioned Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, but their birth names were Stanley Lieber and Jacob Kurtzberg.
Right. And Bob Kane, who created Batman, was Robert Kahn.
They all Americanized their names to assimilate, to get work. But they couldn't, and I don't think they wanted to, suppress their heritage in the stories they told. Just look at the X-Men.
It's children of the atom.
Right. On the surface, they get powers from radiation. But look at how they're treated. They're not celebrities. They are hated and feared. There are government acts to register them.
The ultimate minority metaphor.
Exactly. The research points to the X-Men as a direct allegory for the Jewish experience in Europe. They are a different people living in a world that constantly threatens to exterminate them. And then you have Magneto.
Probably one of the most complex villains in all of fiction.
Because his motivation is rooted in actual history. We eventually learn his real name is Max Eisenhardt, and he is a survivor of Auschwitz. He was forced to work in the Sonderkommando.
The units that had to dispose of the bodies from the gas chambers, that is unbelievably heavy for a comic book.
It changes everything about his character. When Magneto says, "never again," he means it. He isn't trying to take over the world for kicks. He's trying to make sure his people, the mutants, are never marched into camps again. He's a trauma survivor who believes absolute power is the only thing that guarantees safety.
And on the complete other side of that, you have Superman, the ultimate immigrant story.
Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, two Jewish kids from Cleveland. And look at his origin. A baby is about to be destroyed. His parents put him in a small vessel to save him.
It's the story of Moses. A basket in the Nile, a rocket from Krypton.
It's a one-for-one parallel. He's adopted by people who aren't his own, the Kents or Pharaoh's daughter. He grows up with this dual identity, mild-mannered Clark Kent, but secretly the savior.
There's that great essay by Jules Feiffer that argues Superman didn't really come from Krypton.
He came from Minsk or Warsaw. It's the ultimate assimilation fantasy. The Jewish immigrant flees the old world, comes to America, and he just wants to blend in. So he puts on glasses and a suit. But underneath, he has all the power of his heritage.
And he uses that power to help people.
Which is the theological core. It's the concept of tikkun olam.
Repairing the world.
It's a Kabbalistic idea that the world is shattered, and it is our moral duty to find the sparks of holiness and put it back together. Tzedek, tzedek, Tirdoff justice, justice you shall pursue. That's the engine driving all these heroes. The world is broken, and they feel a responsibility to fix it.
Which brings us perfectly to Spider-Man, Peter Parker. He's not an alien, he's not a billionaire, he's just a regular, broke kid from Queens.
And that's why he works so well. The Spider-Mite is almost treated like the idea of being one of the chosen people. He didn't ask for it, it just happened to him. But now that he has this power, he has the burden. With great power comes great responsibility. It's not a gift, it's a profound moral obligation.
It completely reframes the entire genre, doesn't it? It's not just good guys versus bad guys, it's order versus chaos, seen through this very specific cultural and theological lens.
And the comics changed as the politics changed. In the 1970s, we get détente, the easing of tensions between the U.S. and USSR.
And the X-Men reflect that too. The team gets a big makeover.
It goes international. Storm from Africa, Wolverine from Canada, Sunfire from Japan. But the biggest move, the biggest signal, was Colossus.
Russian hero.
Pyotr Rasputin. He's not a villain. He's this soulful, artistic farm boy who becomes the heart of the team. And think about his name and his power. Colossus, who turns into organic steel.
A man of steel.
And the name Stalin literally translates to man of steel. So they took the name of the Soviet dictator, they reclaimed it, and they gave it to a hero who works side by side with Americans. That's a powerful statement of hope.
So when we step back from this whole deep dive, what's the big takeaway for someone listening to this?
I think it's that pop culture is never just entertainment. These funny books were a coping mechanism. They were a way for a generation of Jewish creators to punch Hitler when their country wouldn't, to process the terror of the atomic bomb, and to constantly, desperately cry out for tikkun olam.
It is worth mentioning, though, Stan Lee himself later looked back on some of those early Iron Man stories fighting communists in Vietnam, and he expressed some regret.
He did. He offered a kind of mea culpa, acknowledging that he'd been part of the propaganda machine, even if his main goal was just telling a good story. He admitted that the real world was more complicated than that.
And that kind of leaves us with a question for today, doesn't it? If the comics of the 60s were selling us a very specific Cold War story, what are the myths being sold to us now?
Exactly. When you go see the next blockbuster movie or binge the next big series, who is the enemy? What does justice look like? And what political realities are being packaged for us as entertainment?
The costumes might have changed, but the machine keeps running?
It certainly does.
Now, for those of you who want to explore this more, And believe me, we've only scratched the surface. Professor Faingold's work cites some really fantastic resources.
The essential one is Jews and Comic Books by Ari Kaplan, a must-read.
There's also Stan Lee's own memoir, A Life in Comics, published by Yale University Press.
And for a more modern look, check out Superman, Year One by Frank Miller. And there's a book with maybe the best title ever, is Superman Circumcised by Roy Schwartz. It's a serious academic look at the cultural history.
It's an amazing title. And finally, there's a great article in Haaretz called Supermenches, Comic Book Secret Jewish History by Nerit Anderman.
All brilliant places to start to see how that mix of steel and spirit created the myths we still live with today.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. Keep reading between the panels. We'll see you next time.